Okay, so this is actually a pretty naked looking box. For example, a lot of times it'll tell you like if you're hunting for a text file, those kinds of things. So I'm going to close this guy down. I actually have two of them running because I was being impatient. Okay, so one more time. Why do I have to tell it what stage, what my parent is? What's the purpose for that? Okay, that'd be a good test question, don't you think? All right, so what does this thing return? What's the return value of this thing? The return value is a file. So if you chose a file, so I'm going to go in here and say file F is equal to, okay, and of course it's never heard of a file before in its entire life. So I need to do an import. Okay, so it returns a file. Now, remember now, files are not open, right? File is just like information about a file. So what happens if you selected nothing? You hit the cancel button. So what file is selected? Well, none. So one of the first things you have to do is you have to actually ask it, hey man, if file is not equal to null, then we can do some more processing, right? Because if it's equal to null, you hit cancel, right? And therefore there's no need to do anything, right? Okay, cool. So this is a very common thing to do, where you do a file chooser, it returns a file, then you turn right around and check to see if you selected OK or you selected cancel. Cool. Now there's some other tweaks you can do to this before we get much further. So I'm going to go in here and tweak this guy. So let's add a title to the thing. I'm going to say, set title. I don't know, whatever I'm after. Find your text file. Something, okay? The next one is you can set it what the initial value would be, what the initial file name is. Set initial file name, and I'm going to say, I don't know, junk.txt, like this, kind of cool. And then the one that's a little complex, and this is another one of those where I tend to look at the book before I don't have it committed to memory, and that is what these things called filters. And a filter is, you'll be able to see it as soon as I show it to you. A filter is what type of file am I looking for. So I go here and I say, I need to get the extension filters. It's one of those observable lists. And then I want to add a new extension filter. Again, I don't normally have all this text files, and this is what shows to the human. The human gets to see this, okay? And then behind the scenes, what does the machine? How do you want the machine to interpret that? I want to interpret that like this. Okay. Whoa. Extension filter. Extensions filter? Oh, helps if you spell it right. Oh man, can I just start over? Okay. All right, now I'm going to run this and I'll show you what the difference is. So now when I do this, so now I have this thing that says found your text file, and then it has a choice of a filter. And now it's hunting for something, a particular text file. Okay, does that kind of make sense now? So this is a very common thing to do. It's kind of a black art on this thing. It's not as easy as you might think, these filters. It basically is two parts. What part do you want to show the human? And then what part do you want the machine to actually interpret? For example, if I said sound files, plural, over here this would be like MP3, comma, and then the next one, and the next one, and the next one, and the next one. In other words, you could put multiple file extensions for one of these things at the top. Okay, so I've showed you how to decorate. I've showed you how to do all the rest of that. The rest of this stuff is basically going to be one of those file open patterns, okay? So if I'm opening a file, Okay. By the way, you can kind of sort of imagine that show open dialog is for opening files that exist, and show save dialog is for saving things that into a file that may or may not exist, right? Okay, so that's the difference between the two. One is for saving a file and one is for opening a file. Pretty straightforward. So you guys remember the file open pattern, right? You know how you go in here and you put a try block, and then you have the finally, and you check to see if the open file thing is actually null, and if it's not, you close it. Remember all that stuff? Okay, good, because I'm not going to repeat it here. It's going to be in the lecture notes part, but that's about it. Okay, now I wish, for example, there's a thing called remember when we set up the initial file name? There's actually one called set initial directory, but it's clumsy as hell because, quite frankly, there's no portable way to set the thing like to your documents folder, because people on Linux don't have a folder called documents, and people on Mac don't have a folder in the root of their home directory called documents. So it's just not a good idea to do that. So you saw what happened here is I just let it just dump it at the top, so to speak, and then you can navigate down to where you want. That's perfectly okay in this particular case. It's just like, fine. So if I want to go to my documents, I'll click on my documents. But I don't have it go directly to that because that's not a portable way of doing it. It would work in Windows, but it wouldn't work everywhere else. Okay. So on page 898, they talk about using the console as a way to debug things. Because down here, this little output guy, it actually has a bunch of stuff. So for example, I don't know, I'm going to put in here, let's just do system error. Just like we've been doing before, print ln. You selected mustard. Okay, now this is clearly not going to show up on the screen, right? Because this is a GUI application. And so while we're running it inside of NetBeans, we're going to be able to see this message. But when you give this application to Grandma to see, Grandma's not going to be able to see this at all. It's not going to show up on her screen at all. Okay, let's just run this. Okay, I'm going to make sure I got mustard selected. I click on this and go on about my business. And I should be able to go here and say, somewhere in here, oh, wait a minute, I need the output guy. Doggone it, hang on. So it's Windows, IDE tools. Huh. Output. I thought that's what I had. Huh, okay. Oh, I misspelled mustard. Okay. Let me try that again. That's okay, I misspelled mustard here too. Thank goodness they're not, and it's the mustard for, actually I'm not even sure which control it is. I'm gonna click both of them. Yay, and down here it says you selected mustard. Okay, so this is the kind of a cool way of coming up with some way to do debugging that only you get to see, okay? So it's kind of a simple concept there. I'm not going to make you read that. Common errors to avoid, page 902, there's some good stuff. Now, in my lecture notes, I'm giving you specific instructions on how to solve some problems on your upcoming term project. So you definitely need to look at those. I'm just gonna highlight them here, just talk about them. But in the lecture notes, it actually gives you a little bit more. So first one is, how do you change the background color of a text field? Because that happened. If you watch the video, that happened. And it's FX control inner background, and I use light yellow. How to change the text color of a label? We did that one. That's text fill. How to enable or disable a control, make a text field gray out, so to speak. so you can't do anything. It's called set disable. How to change the focus to a particular control, like after an error occurs, I want to have the focus drawn to the spot where the error occurred. That's request focus. How to remove text from a label. That's just set text with a blank string. There's no clear, unfortunately. How to allow text to wrap around. In other words, if I have a label that has an error message, I want it to, go to the edge and then wrap around and keep going and keep going. So I want a fat label, not just a skinny label, but one that has a couple of rows, enough room there for a fairly complex kind of a message. Anyway, that's called set wrap text. And then, of course, for the file chooser, I need to have the file save dialog box. I want to use an extension filter, and yeah, don't forget the file open pattern thing. Okay, that is the end of this, and I'll see you guys again in the next chapter.